If you're thinking about purchasing a property in the Charlotte metro region, one thing you're going to have to consider is whether you're comfortable living in a property that's managed by a homeowners association, or HOA for short. A homeowners association can make your life in a neighborhood either really amazing or really difficult and challenging. So it's an important thing to know before you sign on the dotted line. The good news is that today we're going to cover 5 pros and 5 cons of living with an HOA. Stick around. You're going to need this in order to find out if the next home you're buying is the dream home for you and your family. If this is your first time to the channel, my name is Yadi Karina Jones. I'm a real estate agent with Lifestyle International Realty here in Charlotte and the surrounding areas. I create videos just like this one to show you what it's like to live here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I try to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly so you get a good picture of what life would be like here. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please take a moment to do so that you can continue learning more about this amazing and incredible city. Now, let's find out more about these HOA associations and the benefits of them, also the disadvantages. What is an HOA? An HOA is a group of homeowners who have decided to establish a set of rules and regulations to govern their community. These rules are set forth in what's called CC&Rs, and that stands for covenants, conditions, and restrictions. If you purchase in a neighborhood that has an HOA, you are automatically, by virtue of purchasing there, agreeing to the set of rules and regulations that have been established by the HOA. You typically see an HOA in a condo community or a townhome community, but you're seeing them way more often now because of planned unit development. So these are groups of homes that are typically put together by builders, whether that is a production builder, such as Meritage, Mattamy, or Taylor Morrison, or whether that is a custom community and they have decided to create an HOA to keep up the appearance of the neighborhood. Now, the main goal of an HOA is to create an aesthetic feel, a high standard in the neighborhood to create property values that are consistent and enduring. Over 50% of homes in the United States are managed by a homeowners association. However, in the Charlotte metro area, you get to decide whether you want to buy a home that is managed by an HOA or not. And in order to make this decision, you really need to know the pros versus the cons of living under these conditions. So today we're going to get into the pros, and I'm going to give you 5 reasons why you should consider buying a property that is managed by an HOA association. The first benefit of having an HOA is amenities. Whenever you see a community that has things like a community pool, a playground, walking trails, a golf course, tennis courts, basketball courts, those are communities that have an HOA. Because the HOA is financially able to support these features in a neighborhood, you will have access to things that you won't have access to if you live in an area that does not have an HOA. This may not be important to you, but if it is, if you want to live in an area that has all these additional things to do, you're probably going to end up in a home that has an HOA. The second benefit of an HOA is that they will provide a community that is well-groomed and maintained. An HOA is usually responsible for common areas, so all of your open spaces, all of your playgrounds, anything that is associated with the community will be covered by the HOA. So they will do all the lawn maintenance. They will make sure that those areas stay clean and that they're well cared for. They will also ensure that every homeowner is taking care of their individual property. So you cannot paint in some kind of loud color. So you won't be living next to a home that's purple per se, because the HOA governs what colors are allowed in that neighborhood. You cannot change your door. You cannot change your shutters. You cannot change the color of your home unless you ask specifically for permission from the HOA. So it makes the neighborhood look very aesthetically pleasing and consistent. So you're not going to have any home that stands out in some kind of outlandish way. So this is a benefit of living in a homeowners association, because what that does is that it increases or it maintains the property values in that area, because you know that all the homes look almost the same, and you also have a consistent maintenance of the area. There's no one that's grass is overgrown. There are no cars parked on grass. There aren't multiple cars parked in the street. So there are things that, because the HOA does not allow them, and because by virtue of living there, you have to abide by these rules and regulations, most of your neighbors are going to do the right thing according to the rules. And so that's going to give you a neighborhood that looks very spot clean and maintained. The third benefit to an HOA is consistent property values. And this is probably the most important reason that an HOA is established. You want to make sure that your home is being valued similar to your neighbor's home. So I'll give you an example. Noda is a neighborhood that's about 8-minute drive from uptown Charlotte. This area does not have homeowners association unless you're living in a building or a condo unit or something like that. Most of these homes are standalone homes. They're not governed by the HOA. And that means that your home could be $1 million home and be large and look amazing, and the home next to you could be worth $300,000 and it's not in good condition. It's falling apart. But there is no one that can call the attention of that homeowner, because they have not signed anything saying that they will agree to abiding by certain rules and regulations. So it sometimes can be challenging to figure out the value of a home in that area, because one home looks so completely different from another home. And that's another thing. When you have a planned unit development, most of those homes are the same home. So you have maybe 4 to 10 different floor plans that a builder decided on, and the homes are pretty much either the same size, very close in configuration. The quality of the work is the same or similar. And so the property values stay consistent because the homes are pretty consistent. They look very similar to each other. And one may be, have more square footage, and one may be, a 2-story versus a 1-story, but the quality is almost the same. Whereas if you live in a community where there is no HOA, one home could be brick, another home could be vinyl, the homes look completely different. And so there is no established value in the area. Each home independently has a value. And just because you live next to a home that doesn't necessarily complement your home, it can actually bring the value of your home down. And when you put it on the market, people may not be attracted to your home because of what's next to it. The fourth benefit of a homeowners association is that you typically have less renters living in that community. Now, that is not true in all cases. Some HOAs do not limit the amount of renters in a community, but a lot of them do. For example, condos and townhomes, once they have exceeded more than 50% people living there that are renters, it is very hard to get a normal loan on those homes, because they are seen as more risky, because there are not homeowners that are caring for the property themselves. And so there is a lot of challenges sometimes when you try to purchase in those neighborhoods. A lot of times you have to put a bigger down payment because there are so many renters there. Now, when you're talking about single family homes, for example, you may not want to live next to an Airbnb, right, where there are different people coming in and out of that home, or there may be parties going on. And typically, if you have a homeowners association, there's going to be rules and regulations around whether there can be short-term renting or long-term renting. And that's going to give you the peace of mind that you're not going to be living next to a home that's, constantly having a lot of activity. So that is a benefit if you are a primary homeowner and you're looking to, kind of lead a very quiet lifestyle. You may not want a whole lot going on next to you. And the homeowners association is going to make sure that those types of things don't happen. The fifth benefit of an HOA is additional services. So what I mean by that is that, for instance, if you live in a condo or if you live in a townhome, and these are governed by a homeowners association, which in 99% of the cases they are, you will not have to pay for certain things. For instance, a roof, right? A lot of homeowners associations will cover any type of roof changes that have to be made or updates that have to be made to your roof or to the exterior of your home. So townhomes and condos will typically deal with all exterior maintenance. So you won't have to worry about that. If something happens to your roof or something happens to the exterior of your home, your association is going to cover that. Now that comes at an expense, of course, because typically if you live in a townhome or in a condo, you're going to pay higher HOA fees. But in the long run, when you go to have like your roof repaired, you won't have to worry about that. The other thing is that in those types of communities, they typically also do the lawn maintenance. So they maintain everything on the outside. You also have certain communities, for instance, Griffith Lakes, which is by Toll Brothers, and Sonata at Mint Hill, which is by Madame E. Homes. These are communities that also provide lawn maintenance. So you don't even have to worry about that at all. So it's an additional service that is built into your homeowner association dues. Of course, if you have pros, you're going to have cons. So there are cons to living in a community that is governed by an HOA, and we're going to get into those right now. One of the cons of a homeowners association is that typically these homes feel very cookie cutter. So you have anywhere from, maybe 4 to 10 or maybe even 15 floor plans, and your next door neighbor might have the same exact home as you, or a couple doors down, that person may have the same exact home as you. And this is because a lot of times these communities are built by production builders, and that is really their model, right? That they build a certain number of floor plans and you can choose from one of them. You can choose a couple different exteriors, but for the most part, there are only a few choices. And so these HOAs can make a neighborhood feel cookie cutter. That is not always true. I know of custom communities where every home is totally different, but it's still governed by an HOA. But even then, there are rules about how those homes can be built. The minimum square footage, the type of materials that need to be used. So sometimes you have to use stucco or brick or stone. So typically, even in cases where it's custom, you still have rules about how you can and cannot build. The second con to an HOA is simply the cost, right? It is more expensive to purchase a property that has an HOA. So for example, townhome communities, typically you're not finding a townhome community in the Charlotte metro region that is going to charge you less than $200 a month. Do they have them? Yes. But typically on average, you're going to pay $200 a month or more. Now, again, in the future, what that gets you is maintenance of your exterior building. But it comes at that cost of that monthly. And these fees pretty much never go down. They typically keep going up. So it may be $200 this year. And then when something else comes down the line, you may have to pay $250 as a, maybe the pool broke down or something that needs to be paid for. Maybe speed bumps needed to be added. And now you're paying $250 a month instead of $200. The other thing that happens with an HOA is that you also can get what's called a special assessment. So a special assessment is simply where the governing body of the HOA decides that there is something in the community that is very important to be done. That could be road upgrades. If it's a private road, it could be like, for example, in certain communities, they have gates. Maybe the gate needs to be replaced because it was broken, or maybe they've decided to add security cameras, or maybe the price went up on landscaping. There may be a number of things that are creating a huge expense on the HOA, and they can't add it to the monthly dues. So what they do instead is they create a special assessment. So they say it's going to cost us $25,000 to get a new gate. We have XYZ amount of families, so we are going to divide the $25,000 by that number of families, and each family has to pay into that. So you may have to pay $2,000, and that is a one-time fee, or it may be broken down per month for a certain amount of time. But once that's approved, there's not really much you can do about it, because the governing body has made a decision. And while they may send out votes, if a certain number of people agree to it, it's said and done. You're going to have to pay it. So let's say it's 2/3 of the homeowners in that community have to agree to it, and 2/3 agree, you're on the hook, whether you said yes or no. So that is something that comes. It's a price to pay for being in a homeowners association. Does it happen all the time? No. Can it happen? Yes. So that's something to be aware of. The third con of an HOA is simply the restrictions, right? There are things that you cannot do if you live in a community that has an HOA. For instance, you cannot just paint your door different colors. So you got up today and you want to paint your door yellow or aqua or blue. You cannot do that. You have to go to the Architectural Review Committee, which will authorize or deny your desire to change your door color. If they feel that it's going to hurt the neighborhood, they will deny your request. For anything involving fencing, you have to get that approved. So anything on the exterior has to be approved. Of course, your interior, you can do whatever you want, but the exterior has to be approved. Sometimes things like even parking on the street, you may not be able to park on the street overnight. You may not be able to have a boat in your driveway. You may not be able to do in-ground gardening. I actually had a client that she wanted to do gardening, and one of the rules of the community she was looking into was that you can't do in-ground gardening. You can only do raised beds. So that was something that she needed to know. So you need to know these before actually purchasing in those communities, because at that point, you're locked in and there is not a thing you can do if you want to grow tomatoes and, collard greens or carrots in the back, and your rules and regulations say you can't. So there are all kinds of restrictions. I've heard of one where all the blinds had to be white, and, you got fines if your blinds weren't white. So, I'm not saying that all of them are super restrictive, but some of them are, and you need to know that. I know in our community, we cannot have the garbage cans. Garbage and recycling cannot be seen from the street level. So we either have to put them in our garage or behind the house somewhere where you can't see it from the street level. So, it can get really in the weeds when it comes to the things that the HOA will fine you or warn you about. Another thing that happens in our community is the mailboxes. Every couple of months or years, they want you to repaint the mailbox. and they want you to repaint the numbers. So, I mean, they get that granular on what the expectation is for the community. So if that's something that bothers you, if you're, not a rule follower, if you have a lot of things that you want to do outside of the norm, like for instance, you could never park your car on the grass in a community that's governed by an HOA. Typically, that will be a regulation that is not allowed. So if that's something, if you have 10 cars that came to visit you and typically you would park them on the grass, you can't do that. So those are things that you need to consider before buying into this beautiful neighborhood and then realizing that the rules are just overwhelming for you and your family. Just like one of the pros was that you will not have as many renters in your neighborhood if you're under an HOA. The fourth con is that you may not be able to rent out your home. So if you decide for any reason that you want to upgrade or you have to move out of the state, but you want to continue to keep that home and you want to rent it, the HOA may have imposed a rental cap, or they may have a rule that says you cannot rent your home at all in that area. So if there is a rental cap, for example, the way a rental cap works is that they'll say the maximum amount of homeowners that can rent their home out is 20%. And so once they get to that 20% amount, you cannot exceed that. So if you purchase into the neighborhood and a year later you decide you want to rent and they've already met that cap, they're already at the max, you will not be able to rent your home. And so you will either have to sell it, or you will have to stay in it, or you will have to maintain both properties. So that is a downside. And some places, they actually will allow renting, but it's the type of renting you can do. For instance, there are homeowners associations that allow long-term renting, right? So a year or more, but do not allow short-term renting, right? Where it's like 14 days or less, because now you have a constant turnover of people, and that can be a disturbance for the other homeowners, right? That home up the block always has new people in it. So this is something to really, really consider if you're an investor or if you're a person that's considering using this. Like, this may be your first home and then you want to use it as an investment in the future. You really, really need to be aware if there's a rental cap, or if there's a restriction to renting, like long-term versus short-term, or if you can't rent at all. And that is something that would be in the conditions, the covenants, and the restrictions. And you need to know that before the property is conveyed to you, before you purchase and sign that dotted line. The fifth con of an HOA is that an HOA can technically foreclose on your home. Now, I know this seems shocking, but if your HOA dues are $100 a month, for example, and you haven't paid those dues in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years, they can absolutely come after your home to recover their money. So they can take you to court and require that the house become foreclosed on to get their money that you owe to the community, because there are a number of homeowners that are also counting on the money that you put into the community to be able to maintain the things like the pool, the basketball courts, the clubhouse, the lawn maintenance of common spaces. And so they can foreclose on your home. They can also impose fines on you and warnings. Typically, they start with warnings and then they can impose fines. So if you're constantly leaving your garbage can out, they can impose a fine for that. They can impose a fine for not cutting your grass. So there are a number of things they can impose fines for, but the most detrimental to you would be if you do not pay and then they decide to foreclose on your property. So that is a danger of living in a community that has an HOA. Today, we covered 5 pros and 5 cons of living in a community that's governed by an HOA. Now, if you were initially thinking that you wanted to live in a community with an HOA because, let's say, for example, you want amenities, and maybe now you're scratching your head and saying, I'm second guessing that because some of these cons are just not working for me, that's exactly what I want. I want you to make an educated decision based on who you are and what your needs are and what your family's needs are. Because once you purchase that property, you will have to abide by all those rules and regulations, or you will get fines or potentially have to just move out of that home, have to sell it because you cannot, abide by all of these rules. So you really need to know what you're getting into. And the other thing is that there are new construction properties that do not have HOAs. I know that that's probably a little shocking, but it's actually true. There are local builders that basically pick a plot of land and build new construction. So it isn't something that you have to decide either or. You may not get the amenities that you want, but you will have the new construction property. So don't feel like just because you want new construction, you have to be stuck with an HOA. You do not. So my name is Yadi Karina Jones. I'm a real estate agent with Lifestyle International Realty. I would love to help you on your real estate journey. If you're thinking about moving to Charlotte, or if you already live here and you're thinking about upgrading or downsizing. So if you are interested in purchasing a home, please feel free to contact me using any of the information below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take a moment to do so that you can continue learning more about the Charlotte region. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.